Hello, I'm Carol.
Hi, I'm Lisa, and welcome to the Grief Gurus, a space for real conversations about grief, coping, and living with loss.
We believe that grief is part of your story, but it's not the whole of your story. And today we're going to be talking about a question I think so many of us ask. Am I grieving the right way? Lisa, I've got to ask you, did you ever Google that? Because I know I did.
Absolutely. I absolutely did. And I think this is a great thing for us to cover because it has so many different parts to it. One thing is that's coming to mind we don't see other people grieving.
Yeah,
So we have no like point of reference to say, oh, well, when my girlfriend lost so and so, this is what it looked like for her. But with this other person, that's what it looked like for him. And so we have no pool of like what normal grieving looks like because no one does it really in public, or most folks don't.
yeah,
Or if you do, it's because you've lost somebody. So yeah, it can be really tricky when you don't even know where to look for, what
yeah,
good grieving looks like.
yeah. And I'm just going to answer the question right now. Are you grieving the right way? Yes, you are for you. And I think it's really important for us to know that because sometimes we do get into that comparison thing and say, well, Sally down the road lost her husband. She's dating at a year and I'm at 5 years and I don't, it doesn't matter. And I am going to quote David Kessler again, who says your loss is the worst loss. And so the reason we grieve differently is because we all have different relationships. It depends how our person died. Did they die suddenly? Was it a heart attack, an accident? Was it Alzheimer's, cancer? Was it a death by suicide? That's going to impact how you're grieving. What's your mental health like? If you're somebody who's already suffering with depression and anxiety, grief is going to add another layer to that. So we have to really look at all the things, the components that are going to affect the way you grieve. And unfortunately, there isn't a blueprint, is there, Lisa? There is no way to grieve. And this is often where people say, but what about the 5 stages? Don't I have to go through those 5 stages? And just very briefly, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote those for the dying, not for the grievers. These were her observations about people who were terminally ill, and they went through these stages. Now, yes, we may go through some of them, but this is not a blueprint that you have to go through each of these stages. And we may be angry, we may have denial, we'll certainly get depressed, but it's not a step by step thing. And I think we think about this with grief, don't we? That maybe it's just a linear progression of gradually each month we're just going to get better and better. And you and I know it's more like a up, down, up, down, up, down. And it can be for years,
And
right?
that's why we talk about integration because we're
Yeah.
integrating things as we go when we're healing. But I think you nailed it. I think the most important thing we want our listeners to hear in this conversation is that there's no wrong way to do it. You are doing it right for you. And then just circling back on this idea of comparison, because we are in a
Yeah.
culture now where everything is driven by comparison. And Teresa Amabile, who's a writer at the Harvard Business Review, says, comparison is the killer of joy. And other people have said that as well. But in this particular situation, I think comparison can be even more kind of evil or threatening to one's mental health because, like I said, there is no particular group of or cohort to look and say, well, how are they doing? And how are they doing? And how am I doing in comparison? What we want to ask ourselves is, what do I need? And I
Mhm.
think one of the other really helpful things for our listeners to know is there's no way, and I'm speaking from my own experience, I wouldn't, try to speak for anyone else, but there's no way that anyone, any one person, even if it's someone we're really close to, no one is going to get what this is like for us. No one is going to get the whole picture. They're going to get pieces of our profile of what it's like. They're only going to get what we share. They're going to get parts that are dusted up a little bit. They're going to get parts so they're never going to get the full picture. And I share that because it can also be as isolating as that sounds. And there are universal pieces and components to healing. that, we certainly focus on those in our virtual community, the Grief Gurus, where we do want to recognize that there are some common elements to this, and that helps us better prepare and helps us better move along as we're integrating. But there's a relief in knowing that we don't want to attach our ability to heal and to move forward to someone else's idea of whether or not we are doing it right, or we've hit that milestone that we're supposed to do. No one is going to get it. Even as I sit here today, my daughter died in 1997, so almost 30 years ago. It wasn't until the last couple of years when I read this phrase somewhere that said, listen, take everybody off the hook, including yourself, and just know no one's going to get this. You can try to share it, you can try to communicate it, but all the more reason why, if we stop looking around for ways to do it right, and we also realize that this is just our own journey, it can feel lonely, but also it's okay because it's ours, it's our unique journey, and it's the way that we stay connected with the person that we've lost. So we don't want to do it like someone else. We want to approach our grieving and our healing and integrating our experience with the components that we bring to the table. That was part of our relationship with that person. So even if there was a textbook, here are the things you got to do and you'll feel better, or this is what good grieving looks like, which isn't even possible to create something like that. But if we did, we wouldn't want it because it's not personal and it's not taking into account our relationship with that person, what all that means in aggregate. And I wonder if you would agree with that, Carol.
I would. I think what's really challenging is the self-judgment we put on ourselves and the societal pressures for us to get back, right? Because if you're working, for example, you have to get back to work within 2 to 5 days here in Ontario. How can you possibly do that if you've lost your child or your husband? How can we do that?
Yeah.
And so then when you go back to work and you aren't coping, you start to question yourself, am I grieving the right way? Everybody else is coping. And again, it is back to that comparison, and we have to start to integrate. We have to give ourselves permission and time to grieve, because it takes longer than you think and it is harder than you think. And I think one of the most important things in grief is to have the right support, the right people around you, somewhere where you can go to listen, to have somebody listen to you and to hear you, so that you're not carrying the full weight of it, because it is heavy. So are you grieving the right way? What do we mean by that? I think what I would like to say is, are you feeling the emotions? Are you allowing what you're feeling? That would be the right thing to do. But they're not staying totally in that. And we've talked about that dual process model where we stay in a little bit of the loss orientated things like crying and being really sad, but then doing a more restorative thing where you're perhaps texting or going out for coffee or returning to work. When we can oscillate between those two, that sort of gives us the best blueprint, I think, for grieving the right way. A little bit of those difficult times, but not staying only in there, going into something that's just pushing you out of your comfort zone a little bit, stepping outside, sitting and having a tea on the deck. That might be all you can do, and that's okay. Grief is challenging. It's the most challenging thing you're going to have to deal with. And so don't be hard on yourself. I know you're going to Google it. And when you Google it, the 5 stages will come up and you're going to look at them and think, man, I didn't get angry, because I know I did. I'm like, oh, I've missed the anger stage. Do I need to go back and find something I'm angry about? No. You need to sit with your emotions. You need to feel it. You need to honor the person and validate really the loss that you're feeling. And you need to figure out, how can I take a tiny step forward? I think that's what we want to do when we're thinking about how to grieve, is to not allow ourselves to stay stuck in the past. Because it is very easy for us to go back and go, well, I wish it was this. And of course, I wish they were here. But they're not, and they can't be. And we can stay in that groove and we can never move forward. And that's the danger of not having people to bounce ideas off and to talk to.
Yes.
Because they can point that out, right, Lisa?
So true. And I think, the better question might be, am I grieving right for me? Instead of just, am I
Yes.
grieving right? And I think I was working with someone recently on this topic. And I think that the better question, am I grieving right for me? We can almost look at that as, we think about the different components of our lives, right? Before we lost our loved one, we had relationships, we had family, we had our work, whatever that might be, whether we're paid for it or not. We have spirituality, we have our finances, and we have our physical health. So,
Hmm.
we can look at those and where were those before we lost our loved one? Or, maybe
Yeah.
the better question is, where were we before they got sick? And we can start to look back and use those as measuring sticks. If since my daughter died, I am not talking to anyone, and my relationships are in a freezer because I'm not responding, that's a sign that you might need some more
Yes.
help. Or, if you've blown through your savings on I think I'll buy a car and a house today. Those are, I would start with these major parts of our lives going back, and if I had bad health before I am grieving, I'm probably still going to have bad
Yeah.
health. So it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
about, where I am in terms of good or bad. It's relatively speaking, where were my finances before this happened? Where was my physical health? Was I sleeping? If I wasn't sleeping before, I'm probably not going to be
Good
sleeping when
luck.
I'm in,
Yeah.
especially acute grief. But if I
Yeah.
used to sleep like a baby and now I have insomnia, that's a sign that you might need some more help. So that's a good
Yeah.
place to start, just with this bigger question. Not am I grieving right, but am I grieving right for me? And then looking at these things.
I think that's a great suggestion. It's something I do with clients as well. Where are you on that grief wheel of all those aspects of your life? And just really, the only person you need to compare with is yourself. That where was I before and where am I now? And then that gives you an area that you can work on and go, you know what, I need to think about reaching out, or whatever that is. So I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I mean, sounds a little silly, but if you're a runner, we don't run. I myself started running marathons for a while after I lost my daughter. And if you're a runner, you're not, or you, at least you try not to, you're not looking at other people's times or their pace. You're playing a game of one. And
Yeah.
golfing, same. You have your own handicap or your own score that you're trying to beat, your personal best. But you're not, you can play with a golfer that's in a completely different category than you are if they can stand it. I didn't have enough patience for you. Like, I'm a terrible golfer. But it's just this idea, just giving that little bit of a metaphor so that you can try to get the idea of, it's not about anybody else. It's about where you are in your own life. And there's no
Yeah.
right or wrong way, just a right way for you. So
Yeah. Beautiful.
hopefully this is beginning, Carol, to answer some of these questions for our listeners about, am I grieving right? And hopefully something resonated. If so, go ahead and like our episode and subscribe, and we'll have more conversations like this in the Grief Gurus in the coming weeks.